Welcome to the Bret Boone podcast. I am Bret Boone. Today I'm joined by a friend of the podcast, friend of the family, former MLB GM and Executive of the Year. He now works for CBS, The Athletic, and Sirius Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Bowden. Jimmy, thanks for coming back on the program.
Bret, always great to be back with you, and happy birthday to your dad, who celebrated a very special birthday the other day. So,
Pop's getting older, but he's doing good. He's doing good.
Yes. Got more Gold Gloves than you did, Bret. You both had a lot.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he's got that. You know, we can always say that. Before we get into the baseball, Jim, I know you're a Cowboy guy. They're close to your heart. What's going on with your Cowboys? 3-7. Give me the breakdown.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Jones just completely miscalculated his team. And, look, after watching the Packers in that playoff game last year, to realize that this is a team that could not stop the run, to do nothing about that in the winter, and then come back this year and you're surprised that you can't stop the run. Also, how do you sit there as an owner or a GM and not know you don't have a running back room? You have a running back room of third and fourth running backs. You have no speed whatsoever. Now, Derrick Henry was available. Joe Mixon was available. Saquon Barkley was available. But there was always an excuse, which was either we don't have cap room, which is a lie, or it was, we're happy with the running back room we have. Really? And then in the wide receiver room, you got CD Lamb and then no other separation and no other speed. You have size, but no other speed. This is a bad football team, to say the least. They're trying to rebuild the offensive line with two key rookies, and it takes time to do that. So, look, the bottom line with this Cowboys team, Booney, is they stink.
I agree. I just know they're near and dear to your heart, just like Aaron and the Trojans, Aaron and the Eagles, me and nobody really. I don't nobody tugs at my heartstrings, but I know it does for you. Okay. And this is why, for those of you listening to the Boone podcast, watching the Boone podcast on YouTube, this is why I love having Jimmy on. Not only is he a very astute baseball analyst, but I get to pick his brain from the GM perspective. Okay. If you, and this, we'll get off football after this one. If Jerry came to you for advice as the owner, because we know he acts in two capacities, as the owner, what would your advice be to him? And then I'm going to ask you about as the GM.
Yeah, that's a fair question, Bret, and I'm going to give you an honest answer. I would say, Jerry, I think you should continue owning this team. I think you need to step away from the GM chair. I think that you should get younger in the coaching staff with people that understand today's analytics and creative offenses. I would suggest he hires Marcus Freeman, the head coach at Notre Dame, to run this football team going forward. Hire my son, Chad Bowden, who's also the GM at Notre Dame, to be the new GM of the Dallas Cowboys. And I think that leadership team would lead the Cowboys to many Super Bowls over the next 10 to 20 years. If he doesn't want to go in that direction, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of the Lions, I think would be a tremendous hire to be the next coach of the Cowboys. And he should try to convince me to come out of GM retirement and come run the Cowboys. So those would be my two suggestions, Bret.
I like it. Isn't it amazing in today's day and age, 2024, you got Jerry Jones has been the owner forever. And obviously you've dealt with many owners. It's their team. They do what they want. Right. The buck stops with them, but sometimes it's not the most prudent thing to take on more. I always think about, and I was asked this question recently, if you could own a team, what would you own? I said, not a baseball team, because I know too much about it and I'd get involved. I'd want to own a football or an NBA franchise where I'm not an expert, and I want to find the best people I can to run my product. I watched Jerry Jones. He's one of those guys. He's an icon. He does his own thing. I'm not going to say he's Marge Schott, but he's in that breath as far as, hey, I'm the owner. I do what I want. I'm the GM today. I'm the president tomorrow. So interesting takes. We might as well start off right at the top. Yankees. I just saw Steinbrenner. He said, we've got the money to sign whoever we want. Obviously, Juan Soto, top prize, had an unbelievable year. If it weren't for Aaron Judge, I think Juan Soto is probably the MVP of the American League. But problem is, Judge was on his team. Do they need what you saw in that postseason? And I know everybody breaks it down to that one inning. Things happen, but that was a sloppy team. I told Aaron several times during the year, they don't run the bases well. They defend mediocrely. I
Yeah.
think the Dodgers were the better team. I think they won. But do you see it more of a tweaking this offseason, or do you see a little bit more of an overhaul?
I don't think an overhaul is needed, but I think we have to look at the Yankees from afar and say, did you get enough production out of first base? The answer to that was no. Okay, well, let's go get Christian Walker and sign him and put him at first base, and I'm going to feel better. Did we get enough production defensively from second base? The answer to that was no. I would prefer to take Chisholm and put him at second and sign Alex Bregman and put him at third base. Did we get enough production from Alex Verdugo in left field? I would argue no. However, I'm okay if the Yankees feel that Jason Dominguez is going to be a star. I'm okay with allowing Dominguez to go out there and play left field and be the answer there. I think you need to bring Soto back. I think Bobby Witt would have won MVP if Judge didn't, but Soto certainly would have finished third for me. I would like to see them match whatever offer Steve Cohen of the Mets or Mark Walter of the Dodgers puts in front of them. I think you have to have Soto. And then I think at the end of the day, and you know this, Brett, better than anybody, pitching, and pitching. You never have enough pitching. And I would keep loading up on that end of it, both in the rotation and in the bullpen, and just try to keep getting, as better as you can. Would I make a run at Corbin Burns? Absolutely. Would I be okay if Soto left and I signed Burns and Santander? Yeah, absolutely I would be. I think there's some tweaking to do. There's some work to do. It's an aging roster in certain spots. I have a lot of confidence in Brian Cashman and your brother Aaron. This was a really good year. Aaron Boone was one of the best managers in baseball. Now, he's not going to win Manager of the Year because of the payroll. Manager of the Year goes to teams that surprise us, right? Those are the guys that win it. But the job that Aaron did, the way he put Weaver in the closing spot, being willing to put Chisholm at third base, having the confidence of Austin Wells being the cleanup hitter most of the year as a rookie. I mean, the job he did was absolutely spectacular.
I think Chisholm did a great job coming over the top of that. I was surprised, and I think he was more than capable at third base. I expected it to be something that wasn't very good. He ended up being very serviceable at third base, but I think you're right. He goes back to second base. Over the years, and we've covered this on the show before, our interactions as general manager, Bret Boone, the player, and the lessons I learned from one Jim Bowden. I thought Juan Soto down the stretch, how he handled the questions, being the most revered free agent this offseason. I think it was a course. It was 101. It was how you do it. I didn't see him isolating the Yankees, his teammates, or the fans of New York, who obviously love him, and obviously he loves playing there. But he kept it very open and says, "Hey, I'm a free agent. I might only get to be a free agent once in my lifetime, and I'm going to go see what the other 30 teams had to say." I thought he played it brilliantly, and when he was speaking, I always thought that's what Bowden would have told me to do, how to handle it. I think he handled it unbelievable because he pissed nobody off, and at the same time, he's out there just going city to city and just get that number higher and higher. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you got to give credit to Scott Boras and the Boras Corporation. They come up with these pamphlets and books and these binders on exactly how you're supposed to answer these questions properly, and not all clients do that. When Scott Boras gets a superstar client who buys into how to do it the right way, Scott maximizes the return for them. There's not a lot of players in Major League Baseball that could turn down 440 million like Soto
Yeah.
did in 2022 from the Washington Nationals. Scott had him turn it down and said, "I'll get you something with a 5 in front of it or 6 in front of it." And that's exactly what he's going to do for Juan, who, by the way, listened. There's not a lot of people that after winning a World Series would sit there and say, "Nah, 440 million is not enough." Really? That's tough to do. But Juan Soto knows that Boras is the best. No one has broken more contract records in the history of sports, not baseball, but sports, than Scott Boras. If you listen to him and you're a star player, he will absolutely maximize what he can get. So when Soto came out and said, "I'm going to listen to all 30 teams," you really think the Athletics and the Pirates and the
Right.
Rays? Come on, man. We all know better than that. We know where Juan's going to end up. It's either going to be the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Phillies, or the Red Sox. Sorry, Blue Jays, I'm not putting you in the 5. That's my big 5. I wrote an article in The Athletic today about this. Juan Soto is not going to leave a penny on the friggin' table. Not a penny. I'm going to tell you straight out. Whoever makes the biggest offer, Scott Boras and Soto are then going to go back to the team he wants to go to, whatever team that is. And they're going to say, if you beat this, you got the player. That's what they did with Yamamoto when Steve Cohen had the highest offer and he ends up going to the Dodgers. But they're not going to leave it. Soto's not leaving a penny on the table. So I'm predicting $622 million.
Wow.
Why the 22? Uniform
Number.
22, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something that Juan probably wants. What's the difference, right? I think you're going to see a deal that extends to at least 41. So that's 15 years. His AAV will break the record. The net present value will break Ohtani's record. He won't get to 700. But I believe they'll structure it in such a way that they can walk out of that of doing the deal from the podium with 622.
Wow. It'll be interesting to see. And the only thing is, I think I put myself into his position as a player, and I think, wow, I'm playing in pinstripes. I'm in the Bronx. I'm in the greatest city if you win that you could possibly be in. I'm playing for the Yankees. The city loves me. I obviously love hitting in that stadium. Man, I want to get everybody else, but in the end, I want to go back to the Yankees. And I just think I agree with you on all points, but I think if somebody like San Francisco came into the fold, I don't think he'd go there. That it's too big. And you look long term, how many home runs is that going to cost him as a hitter? That's the one thing I think about is San Fran, the ballpark not conducive to Soto, hitting 30, 35, 40 a year.
Yeah. Let me ask you this though, Brett. Because I think we're all different, right? And we all
Hmm.
value things differently. Like if I was a free agent, I don't need the most years and the most dollars. When you start talking about 5 or 600 million, that's enough for me to live on. I don't have to have the last penny for me. But two things that I would want. One, I want to be in a place where I really want to spend the rest of my career, which
Hmm.
my family's going to spend a lot of the year there. And number two, I want to win as many world championships as possible, which begs the question, why not the Dodgers? If I could
Yeah.
sit there and play right field with the Dodgers, Mookie Betts goes back to second base, and the top of the lineup is Betts, Ohtani, Soto, and Freeman for the
It's not
next
even
several years.
fair. It's not even fair you get him.
I mean, right? But if you're Juan and they're going to match what the Yankees and Mets have on the table, and I get to buy a mansion in Malibu, a mansion in Beverly Hills, a mansion in Pasadena, right? And play for the Dodgers for the next 15 years. I mean, I don't know. It would be, to me, it would be tough to go back to the Yankees if that was an option for me.
Yeah, that's true. And do you think the Dodgers could possibly be players in this?
Yeah, I mean, they met with him. They met with him Monday.
Wow.
Yeah, they met with him for several hours on Monday. Mookie Betts has already said he wants to move back to the infield. Dave Roberts said it's happening. So that means he's going back to second base. So who's playing right field for the Dodgers? It's a choice. Andy Pajas or Juan Soto.
Wow, that would be it would almost be unfair. Otani coming back pitching again, maybe
Right?
fourth in the rotation. Unbelievable. All right, one more thing about the Yankees. I'll get to the next subject. What do you see long term, Aaron Judge? How for me, he's the best offensive player in baseball. Um, do you see long term him staying in center field, or they need to get him off his feet and get him in the right field just for the longevity of that bat?
Yeah, the game has changed a lot, Brett, since you played, right? When you were
Sure.
playing, range mattered.
Hmm.
It did. And it was a huge difference maker, right? Just because I'm big on defense, I struggle watching Judge and center, but I do have to admit, after sitting and watching all of their games this year, he does make the plays. He
Yeah.
does. And it does work in the way baseball's played today. It actually does work the way you position the player, etc. So I think you can win with it. To your point, would it be better to have him in right field? Yes, but you can't do it with Soto because Soto really can't play left at Yankee Stadium. And Stanton's DHing, so you can't DH Soto. So, look, I'm okay with Soto and right and Judge and center for now. At some point, Judge will end up in right field. But if they have both Judge and Soto, then my guess would be Judge will end up in left field someday.
All right, moving on. White Sox GM, put your GM hat on. White Sox 121 losses. What do they do? What do you do?
Well, I wouldn't be the GM of the White Sox. I
No, I just
couldn't.
said to put your
I
hat on.
couldn't. I couldn't do that. I'll put the pretend cap on. Yeah, so you have a lot of work to do, and they don't want to spend money, but you're going to have to spend money to turn this around because you can't build the team the way the Cubs built the World Championship, the way the Nationals built the World Championship, the way the Astros built the World Championship, and the way the Orioles are trying to do it. Because, when you stink this bad, in the olden days, you used to get to pick at the top of the draft for 6 straight years. And then all of a sudden, you could make a run and build a team to win a championship. Those days are gone. So they had one of the worst records in the history of Major League Baseball, and yet at the end of the day, they're not even going to pick in the top 8. So because of the new CBA. So how do you get there from here? Number one, you take Garrett Crochet and Lewis Robert, and you try to turn them into 8 prospects. Then you sit there and you better draft right. You can't miss on your draft picks. You can't miss an international. But then here's what they don't want to do that they have to realize they have to do. They have to sign a bunch of free agents and overpay them on short contracts, 1 or 2 year deals. Sign as many as you can, overpay so they come to Chicago, because they're not coming to Chicago unless you're paying them 40% more than everybody else. Get them to come to Chicago, trade them all in July for prospects, and do it again. And just keep doing it again, over and over again. Get players that you can see have a pathway of helping contending teams come August. You'll have paid half of the salary. You're probably, because you're overpaying anyway, going to have to pay more to move the player, but you're going to do it anyway to get the prospect capital. And you're going to have to do that heavily for the next 3 or 4 years before you can even at least see the light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of work ahead of them.
One thing about that scenario is, and I agree with you on the Crochet thing, I think Robert, for just a combination of things, hurt his value last year. I think he was hailed a year ago, maybe, but I think down the stretch and the way things played out, I think he really did hurt his value. Crochet still being at the top, value-wise, left-handed power pitcher. Mariners,
Yeah.
close to me. I keep a close eye on them. My time there. I don't think I've ever seen this, Jimmy. The rotation of a Castillo, Kirby, Wu, Gilbert, Miller, best pitching in baseball, ERA wise. And you don't get to the postseason in the easiest time in the history of baseball it is to get to the postseason. What do you do in Seattle?
Yeah, this is one of the more perplexing things I've seen in a long time. The hardest thing to do as a general manager, and I held that position, as you know, for 17 years. The hardest thing to do is to build a starting rotation. That is the hardest thing to do. You built a starting rotation that you just mentioned, and I agree with, is the best starting rotation in baseball, 1 to 5. And a rotation literally capable of running the table in October. That's how good it is.
Yes, it
To
is.
continually put together a lineup that strikes out more than everybody else is just mind-boggling. To sit there and have Julio Rodriguez and not protect him in front and behind him with 2 more impact bats is inexcusable. And so, what they're doing, and look, Jerry DePoe is a really good friend of mine, and I'm a big fan of his work. I think he's a really good baseball guy, but he needs to figure out his offense room, right? He needs to go overpay Bret Boone to lead the podcast to be president of offense for the Seattle Mariners, because there is a huge problem that exists at the major league level, the minor league level, the scouting level, the amateur level, and they're just not getting bats and don't know how to produce runs. Look, I made my mistakes as a GM. I did early. I had lineups on a team you were with where I had way too many strikeouts. Look, it didn't take long to fix it. It didn't take long to understand it doesn't work. You can't let the window of this rotation get away without a chance of popping champagne. You just can't do it. And if you're the owner of the Mariners, Brett, has to understand, okay, maybe you can't afford to extend your payroll this year, but you have to. You'll be able to make it up in 3 years or 4 years, and you can lower your payroll to compensate for increasing your payroll the next few years. But your window is here today. It will not last long. Go to the open market, go get Alonso and Bregman, and go win. Like, you're 2 huge bats away from winning now in 25. Don't let this get away, because I'm going to tell you this. 4 years from now, 2 bats will do nothing for you, and you'll be looking up at the rest of the division.
Yeah. It's amazing to me because in hindsight, before the season started, I said, "You give me those 5 pitchers, keep them relatively healthy, and pitch the way they do. Throw out a AAA lineup, and you'll still go to the postseason in this format." I was wrong. I was wrong.
Yeah.
Um, Mets, you mentioned Alonso. There's a lot of talk there. How much are the Mets, do you think, in on Soto? Does it have anything to do with Alonso? Is Alonso leaving? I'd love to see him come to the Mariners. That's a big right-handed bat they need.
Yes.
And I really like Mendoza, the new manager of the Mets. I think he did a great job. They're running the postseason, exceeded, I think, the talent of that roster. It was kind of a magical run. I think they need a lot of pitching. Uh, Take me through the Mets real quick. What they need, what they're going to do, and what they're going to do. Do they have a legit shot at Soto?
So, like you, I love Carlos Mendoza, right? They got the long term answer at manager. I love David Stearns. You got the long term answer at president of baseball operations. And I love the owner, Steve Cohen, because he has more money than everybody else does. So, that trio is going to put the Mets in a position to win for years to come. They're in a great spot. Baseball wise, Juan Soto is Steve Cohen's number one target. He wants Soto. I believe he'll put the best offer on the table. He'll pay more than anybody else to try to get him to come to New York. If they do that, it's likely that Alonso leaves. Mark Vientos goes from third base to first base, and they bring in either Willie Adames or Alex Bregman to play third base. David Stearns is very big on defense. Athleticism and defense is extremely important to him. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see what he does at first and third base. I could also see him doing Soto and Christian Walker, the Gold Glove first baseman, and leaving Vientos at third. I kind of view it that way. But the one thing I know the Mets are going to do is they're going to get a top of the rotation starter or two. Burns, Fried, Sasaki. I think there's a chance they get not just one of the three. I think there's a chance they get two. Maybe Blake Snell becomes another one. David Stearns is going to build that team with pitching and defense, and then Steve Cohen's going to add the bats with the money. The Mets are in a great position. They're going to be a scary team for years to come. But the fun part is that division is really good because the Braves and the Phillies are still the best teams in that division. But the Mets are going to be serious players this offseason, and checkbook baseball is going to be a theme in New York.
Moved to the Cardinals, obviously, historical franchise. Haven't lived up to the last couple of years. Haven't You're used to seeing them in the postseason pretty consistently. They've missed it the last 2 years. Mozeliak to Heinblum, beginning of 2026. What's that process like? The handoff.
Last place. So you get your seatbelt on. Sorry, St. Louis fans, but Pittsburgh's better, Cincinnati's better, Milwaukee's better, and the Cubs are better. Cardinals are going to be in last place in this transition year. John Mozeliak's final year is going to be all about trying to move Nolan Arenado. He's already moved on from Paul Goldschmidt. Lance Lynn is gone. Gibson is gone. He's going to get this team younger. He's going to give young players an opportunity, and then in the fall, he's going to turn the reins over to Heinblum, who is going to do what he did in Tampa, try to build the team through scouting and development. Although Heinblum got fired in Boston, he did a lot of good things in scouting and player development that the Red Sox are soon going to benefit from. And St. Louis is going to go back to what they used to do, which is having scouting and development being the backbone of their franchise going forward with different leadership. But it's going to be a rebuild that's going to take a while, and they're going to have teams like Milwaukee and Cincinnati, Chicago, Pittsburgh that they're going to be looking up at in the standings, because all four of those teams are much better positioned both at the major league and minor league levels right now.
Last team I want to discuss, world champion LA Dodgers. They're kind of getting into that territory where that fan base is kind of expecting. It's kind of Yankee-esque. We win every year. Obviously, the roster they have and the amount of talent on that team, I couldn't even imagine them throwing a Soto into the mix. It would kind of be unbeatable if you stay healthy. But there's some questions. Bueller, who came on and had a great World Series performance. Uh, Clayton Kershaw, what do we do with him? Teoscar Hernandez, their big free agent, had a big year for him in the outfield. Win the World Series. I know they're revamping Dodger Stadium again, another facelift, another upgrade. I see it on my feed every day. But in seriousness, what do the Dodgers do from here? Do they tweak what they already have? What do you think the Dodgers see this offseason?
Well, the first thing they do is they ask Commissioner Manfred if they can change the first name of their team from Los Angeles to World, because they become the World Dodgers, and the ratings they get over in Japan is just absolutely incredible. Mark Walter is going to continue to spend money. Andrew Friedman is going to continue to spend his money, and they're going to continue to put the best possible team they can on the field every single year. This team went through 12 starting pitchers and had the best regular season record than anybody else. That is just absolutely mind-boggling. So the Los Angeles Dodgers are going to go to a 6-man rotation next year, and they're going to baby all of their pitchers, and they're going to spend April through September preparing all their pitchers for October. That's what they're going to do. You're not going to see any 200-inning pitchers or 180-inning pitchers. 140, 150, and hopefully get Dustin May back, get Tony Gonsolin back, get Tyler Glasnow back, get Clayton Kershaw back, who there's not a lot left with him, but they're still hoping he's a 5-inning pitcher, which he can still trick him. He's left-handed and certainly going to the Hall of Fame. And so they'll try to bring Buehler back. They won't overpay Buehler after all they've been through and the 2 Tommy John surgeries, but they will try to bring him back. Someone might overpay him. Someone like the Braves may come in and just overpay. I would. Just sitting watching him in October, I'm all in on Walker Buehler. Like I want the guy. So they may not be able to bring him back. Teoscar wants to come back. I don't think Andrew's going to do a ridiculous deal, but he'll do 2 or 3 years if he wants $25 million a year. I think he'll continue the relationship with Tio to play left field. He still has Pajes, who can fill in there. And besides going after Soto, I'm going to be surprised if they don't make a strong run at Willy Adames. The idea of putting Adames at short and Betts at second and Soto and right is something I know the front office is salivating about. Remember, Andrew Friedman and Willy Adames when they were both together in Tampa Bay. Willy Adames's high energy, his enthusiasm fits into the Dodger culture. He's a Dodger kind of player. So Soto and Adames, I think, probably are 2 guys they'll bring in, and then just try to get their pitching healthy from last year. And if that happens, they'll be in position to be the favorites to win the World Series again.
All these free agents out there, and you've mentioned on the pitching side, the headliners are the Burns and Snell and Fried. I've seen some tape of the Sasaki kid. He's 23 years old. He kind of reminds me of a DeGrom. He's long. He's got those long limbs, throwing a billion. All you've seen, what you've been hearing, is he as good as advertised?
Yeah, so I saw him. I called the World Baseball Classic for SiriusXM, and I got a firsthand look before Yamamoto signed with the Dodgers. I got a firsthand look at him. I got a firsthand look at Sasaki and Ohtani when they came and played those games in Miami. We saw Yamamoto, and I said he can pitch in the big leagues right now. He can add, subtract, paint, knows how to pitch, keeps the hitters off balance, knows what he's doing. Looks like a clear number 2. At that time, he was only throwing 94, 95. Now he's throwing 97. But Yamamoto was what I saw. Ohtani came in and punched out Trout, but we already knew about Ohtani. Sasaki came in late, and he was 101 to 103 with a wipeout split finger, an 80 split finger, and showed a flash of a 60 slider. I agree with you. I actually wrote this. I had DeGrom. I had a combination of DeGrom, Verlander, and Wheeler, a little bit of each of the 3. That's the upside. But here's the difference between Sasaki and others. When Ohtani, Darvish, and even Masahiro Tanaka, when those 3 came over, they were accomplished pitchers, Yamamoto too. All 4 of them were accomplished in Japan. We knew exactly what they were. I think you have to view Sasaki like first overall pick in the draft, like when Garrett Cole came out of UCLA, or how a lot of us are viewing Andrew Painter right now of the Philadelphia Phillies, the best pitching prospect in baseball. I think Sasaki is that. When he comes over here, I don't even think there's a guarantee he wins Rookie of the Year. From a scouting perspective, when you hold up the radar gun and you watch the stuff and the delivery, you see Cy Young awards in the future. But it's not proven yet. And he may not even win Rookie his first year. And his first year, whoever gets him is going to pitch him between 120 and 140 innings. That's about all you're going to get year 1 from him. The velocity was down 2.7 miles an hour this year in Japan. I'm not worried about it. He did have an oblique. He had a little shoulder fatigue at one point, but he also was learning how to pitch a little bit instead of just when I saw him, a year and a half ago, he was just a thrower, right? He wasn't. He didn't show pitchability yet. He was learning that this year. So I think the upside is first overall pick in the draft or number one prospect, however you want to view him. Not proven yet, but the ceiling is ridiculous. He's not going to sign until after January the 15th. And the most he's going to make in a signing bonus is about $7 million. And so why do I bring that up? I bring that up because how's he going to make his money? In the States, you don't make it until after 3 years, you're eligible for salary arbitration. And then it's 6 years until you're a free agent. So that's after 2030. So how is Sasaki going to get paid between now and then? Well, it's going to come from endorsements in Japan. That's how he's going to get paid. So everyone is putting him with the Dodgers. Well, the problem with that is if he goes to the Dodgers, he's not going to get the endorsements because he'll be in the shadow of Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Yamamoto is already feeling being in the shadow of Ohtani. He's not getting the endorsements. In fact, Kodai Senga, the Mets, is getting more endorsements in Japan than Yamamoto is. So Sasaki is probably better off signing with the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Mets, an East Coast market, or maybe the Padres, and maybe endorsements. You can play the rivalry against Ohtani instead of with Ohtani. But I think at the end of the day, Wasserman and Joel Wolf, the agent for him, needs to put him in a spot where he can be making $7 million a year. And you're going to have to do that, I think, in a different market than the Dodgers at this point.
That's interesting you bring that up because a year ago, before Yamamoto signed, people were asking me, oh, Yamamoto is going to go to the Dodgers. I said, why would he want to go to the Dodgers? I remember playing with Ichiro, and I know how the culture is. And it's like, no, I want Otani's the man in LA. I want to be the man in wherever. And Yamamoto coming over with his resume and the amount of money he got, I'm figuring he was a shoo-in to go to New York. All of a sudden he signs with the Dodgers, and I'm going, why would he do that? That's not what I expected. You just bringing it up on the lack of endorsements versus the Ohtani, who's kind of, the Superman of baseball right now, and should be with the double threat. That's a real interesting point. All right, before I let you get out of here, Hall of Fame ballots out this year's. Every year I go over it and I go, okay, why should he go? We all do it. The only shoe in for me is Ichiro. He's going to go in first ballot. But I've been looking at some interesting guys. A Billy Wagner, is it time for him to get in? A CC Sabathia, what do you think his chances are? I played with Andrew Jones. I played with a lot of great center fielders in my day. Andrew, by far, the best elite defensive center fielder I've ever seen. And the interesting case that I found myself looking at was a Carlos Beltran. It's one of those guys where years later I look back and then I go through his numbers. I said, this guy was a lot better than I thought. Add the stolen bases on top of the big numbers he had. And I'm still kind of critiquing them on our value system. When I played, it was average, home runs, RBIs. That's what we were paid to do. Carlos Beltran had all three, plus he had 300 plus bags, stolen bases for a career. So an interesting case for him. Like I said, Ichiro's the only shoe-in for me. Those guys mentioned, Jim Bowden's take.
Yeah, they all should get in my take. You're right with Suzuki, but I want to talk Andrew Jones for a minute because Andrew Jones played his career during my GM career in the National League. He was the best defensive center fielder I've ever seen in my lifetime, and it's not even close.
Yep.
I asked the late Frank Robinson when he was managing the Nationals for me, I asked him who's the best defensive center fielder you ever saw, and his response to me was Andrew Jones 1A and Willie Mays 1B. I think that says a lot, right? I've asked John Schuerholz, Bobby Cox, Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, and John Smoltz if Andrew Jones is a Hall of Famer. All of them said yes without hesitation. You as a player that played with him and against him, you'll say best defensive center fielder you ever saw. Now, if you're the best defensive center fielder you ever saw, then you're a Hall of Famer regardless of your offensive numbers for me. Ozzie Smith got in the Hall of Fame. He was the best defensive shortstop that I ever saw. I understood why he got in there.
Yeah.
It's the same argument, though, in center field. Andrew Jones took singles, doubles, and homers away. But he also had the home runs to get in as well. And I think what happened with this voting group is they saw him at the end of his career, and they penalize him because he didn't age well. But if you took the 10 prime years, it was clearly a Hall of Fame. And if he had retired after those prime years, he would have been a no doubt Hall of Famer. But everyone saw him with the Dodgers and the Yankees. And then people started saying, well, yeah, no. And they're not voting for him. They're wrong. He has to be in. This is a joke. It irritates me. It annoys me. Wagner has to get in. The reason he hasn't gotten in is people want to compare him to starting pitchers. You can't. He was the best left-handed closer of his era. He gets in because you can only compare him with closers. He's in the conversation with the Riveras and the Trevor Hoffmans. He belongs in the Hall like they belong in the Hall. You have to absolutely not compare him to other pitchers. Compare him to the closers that he was. He was a Hall of Fame closer. And CC Sabathia absolutely is getting in. No doubt. He's got the volume. I don't know if he gets in the first year, but he's getting in. And Sabathia has done all the right things after playing to get in. His personality is such that he has stayed engaged with the media. He's stayed engaged with the fans. He's stayed engaged with the commissioner's office. And all of those elements play into voters, like it or not. And that's going to benefit Sabathia. So he's going to get in as well for sure.
And I'll just touch on what you're talking about Andrew. And this is no disrespect to the guys I played with because they know this. The only one that might not admit it is Junior Griffey. I played with Griffey as a kid when we were both 23 years old. Unbelievable athlete in center field. I played with a Mike Cameron. I played with a Torrey Hunter. I played against the Finleys of the world. Just great center fielders. Played 1 year with Andrew Jones. It's not even close.
Right. You're right.
And those guys, Mike Cameron is a good friend of mine, and he was miraculous on those Seattle teams. Short up center field was great. Gold Glover. And he even says to me, shoot, Andrew's by far the best. And that's just the way it was. To not to one up you on the Bobby Cox, but I remember during a game when I was in Atlanta in 1999, Andrew went back, made a play because he played so shallow. That's what made him incredible.
Yeah.
And he went back on the ball as good as anybody. And I remember he made a play, and Bobby Cox, who had watched Willie Mays play at length, turned, looked into the dugout, and he said, "Willie Mays, my ass.
Yeah, right.
Andrew Jones is better." And Bobby, I'm sorry I'm throwing you under the bus. That's a real, true life story. But for Bobby Cox to say that about Andrew Jones, you know
Amen.
how special of a defender he was. Jimmy, I appreciate it. I love your insight. You always have a extra little take that everybody doesn't have, but I appreciate you coming on the program. For those of you checking us out on YouTube, we got our own channel now. Continue to check that out. For those of you listening to the Boone Podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you download your apps, until next time, keep it here.